cool. So we getting closer to finishing off our profile view. Let's add a seller name because on our database we have a seller name. Favorites. I was looking at the wrong document. Favorites, let's see here. We have a seller name, so let's make sure we have a seller name as well, okay? Let's update that and then we'll move over to our next task. So back in our model, in our favorite model, again, I want to reiterate this for the X time here. We want to make sure our keys match the keys here, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and add in our property called seller name. Seller name. And if we look here, my seller name is camel case, seller name, okay? If I have seller names here, I have to look for seller names in my dictionary because if I don't look for seller names, it's not gonna exist. So let seller name equal to dictionary seller name. If I do this, that's not gonna work. Right? I have an extra space here. Everybody? So if we do one thing come our assessments, just create constant spaces. That way you could just say whatever favorite dot seller name, for example. Right? Everybody with me? Seller name. I'm not using seller name yet. So seller name self dot seller name equal to seller name build. Just make sure our keys here from the dictionary object. Here we're querying for a key. That key is from Firebase. Does that key exist? If I have seller name lowercase n, it's not going to exist. And if I'm in a failable initializer, I don't have a default value to go to. The entire object is failed, and it returns nil. And I'm like, oh my God, I have favorites. I'm not seeing it. Where is it, right? So please, 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 don't let that be the 2 days for the first assessment there, the assessment there. Cool? All right, cool. So let's go back to our cell, finish that off. And then in our cell, item cell, we have a missing name here. Let's fix that. Let's just do favorite dot seller name. And we're done here with that part of the app. Awesome. Next, our next task or our final task, well, maybe final task, if we finish on time, we're gonna be good for refactoring. Our next task is to update our cell such that our label that shows the seller name is tappable. So we'll revisit our beautiful subject of custom delegation. We love that, right? So when I click on a label here, I want to segue over to a new view controller, which we haven't created yet. And that new view controller will have a header view with the seller's image and whatever items that seller has. Cool? Awesome. Let's go ahead and build that out. We'll go to our cell. Actually, what's easier here? Let's just go to the cell, the item cell.swift file. And let's visit, yeah, that's fine. Let's do it in item cell. We have our seller label. This is what we're after. In our seller label, let's go ahead and implement, I'm in my item cell. Let's go and implement layout subviews. Super layout subviews. My item, let's first change the color of the seller name label. So seller name label dot text color equal to system orange, keeping up of system orange. So here we're just simply changing the color. Let's run that, make sure that works. And then we'll continue building it out. So this works, our username, we change the color. So anytime we change the color, like in our case there, the user automatically thinks, oh, I could click on this thing, right? If it's like a static black or whatever, the user doesn't automatically go to click on it. But here we give it some sort of color, the user like, oh, I could click on that. I mean, yes, we cannot click on the price, but maybe we could click on the price at some point. But for now, we could click on our label, but for now, we cannot click on the label. We need to add code for that. Layout subviews gets called anytime that the view itself is about to show its subviews on screen. So that's a good opportunity to do extra view setup code, like change the color, do some animation, whatever you want to do. It's kind of like view reload. Yeah, exactly. Cool? Very good. And making sure to call super layout subviews is very essential here. You have to call that super layout subviews here. All right, so we want to have a tab gesture. So why do I want to do this up here? Let's have a tab gesture below our outlets. Tab gesture, UI, tab gesture recognizer. And here I'll say let gesture. This is good review for delegation here. UI tab gesture, return gesture. We'll have some target. It's going to be at Objective C. It's going to be a private function. We could call it handle tap. Takes in some sort of gesture, which is a UI tab gesture. Cool. So in our gesture here, we could say gesture dot add target, where I'm looking for that function in self, in the item cell, and what function am I calling? Selector, I'm calling handle tab. Cool. And here we could put a simple print statement for now. Again, when you're dealing with code like this, please test out first. So tab was tapped. And now we also want to set up the gesture. So seller name label dot add gesture recognizer tab gesture build. So we have a lazy property initializer here. We instantiated a tab gesture. We gave it a target. The target is self. That's why it's looking for the function. The function it's looking for is in our selector, and it's called handle tap. This is handle tap here. So anytime we tap on it, we want to see a print statement was tapped, being logged onto the console. Okay, cool. So we'll run the app. We'll run our application. We'll click on some username. It doesn't happen. What's happening here?
Don't have to have, you have to, make like activated for it to be, what's the word?
What's the word? Amini's looking for a word here. User interaction enabled. Why do we have to do that? Because remember, back a couple units ago, we said there's two UI controls, or not controls, there's two UI elements that don't accept interaction by default. UI label and UI image view, right? So here, our label doesn't accept any gestures right now. By default, it does not accept gestures. So we need to go ahead, that word Amini is looking for here, and type that word out. With machine learning, Xcode knows it's user interaction enabled, right? And we set that to true, right? So at that point, the label accepts gestures. right? Very similar to our UI image. So that is very important to know there on a label, labels and UI image views. So if we run the app again, and we click on whichever username we want, we get the action that we're looking for, was tapped. But if I tap outside of that area, I could segue. Cool? Awesome. Thank you, Amini, and that word there, hangman, team effort. May, you came through there too, right? Everybody came through, team effort there, awesome. All right, cool. So are we all able to see was tapped being logged? Yes, before we continue? Before we continue, Chelsea, are you able to see was tapped being printed?
Not yet, but
What is that? What is the current issue so far?
it's not something that I'm thinking about. But
It's what?
huh?
Is it like favorite stuff that we had earlier?
No, I haven't properly set up the item key. So
Do you want to just like pull from our repo? Let me just push right now so you could pull the latest changes. And then just change the Google P list. Does that work for you?
yeah.
All right. So let us go ahead and push. So commit. What did we just do here? We can view favorites and added tap gesture to seller name. Seller name label. Okay, so I'll push that and you could pull, push. You have the link to the repo, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So I just pushed, you could pull, and then just swap out that Google P list. That'll put you in a good space with where we are. Okay, so now we're able to see the tapped. Now we want to be able to communicate to the view controller. We want to be able to communicate to the view controller. Hey, something was tapped here. We could go further, and we could, we could go further. We could create a variable.
So when it's clicked, we want to show the users.
Yes, yes, yes. We want to segue over to to a new view controller showing the user's items.
Right. So can we just like push in that view controller at this point?
Yes, we are going to do that. That's where we headed. So this is where we headed. We click on our seller name,
Right.
and we push a new view controller. We call it seller items controller.
Mm-hmm.
It shows the seller's image,
Right.
and it shows the items.
Okay.
But we don't have that yet, right?
Yes.
Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have that yet.
Right.
I mean, we could filter our table view,
No.
but that's not what we want. Does that make sense? Like if I click on it, I could just filter the table view by that seller name and be done. But we want to segue to a new view altogether with a new UI. Cool? Cool. All right, so we have a private var here. We'll call it current item. Current item is some item. Current item is some item, and in our configure cell, we'll say current item equal to item. And we'll continue on to be able to capture the current item that was selected. So now in our print statement, we could say, using string interpolation here, know the current item. We could say current item dot item name was tapped. Basically, we go in towards our protocol. Our protocol, custom protocol, will pass that current item that was selected to the view controller. So now we're capturing current item with this variable here. So when we run our application, again, let's test. Actually, not item. I wanted, well, doesn't really matter. So if I click here, Shin Godzilla was tapped. That makes sense. If I click here, MacBook was tapped, right? So the item just doesn't have the item name. It has more. It has the whole item. It also has the seller, the item seller ID. It has all the information we need to get that user. Cool, very good. All right, so now let's continue on. Let's go build our custom protocol. So here we'll build out our custom protocol. We'll call it item cell delegate. Any object only works with classes here. And we'll have one function, did tap user or seller name, or did select seller name, did tap seller name, did select seller name. Did select seller name, we'll pass in our item cell, which is item cell. And we'll also pass in the item. Make it easier for us on our view controller. So here we have two parameters, the item that was selected along with the cell itself. We'll continue on building out our delegation method. So here we have step 1, custom protocol. We have step 2, custom protocol. And here we are doing weak var delegate type item cell delegate, and this now has a weak reference to whatever view controller is conforming to it. This is step 2. And step 3, we'll use the delegate object wherever we have that function that we want to listen to or send notifications from. So we'll go over to our handle tab here and do delegate did select username or seller name. We pass in self and we pass in current item. And this is step 3. Step 3, custom protocol. Custom delegate protocol. Let's review. So custom, what did I do for step 2? So step 2 was doing the weak var delegate here, up here. Step 1 was creating the protocol itself. Step 2 was creating the weak delegate. Again, we could call this any variable we want, but delegate is convention there. Makes sense. It's a delegate, custom delegate we created. And step 3 is where do I want to go ahead and broadcast that information, right? What function, what data do I want to send back to that view controller, right? So this is step 3. Can we navigate over to the item cell view controller? Go up to step 2. Step 1 is creating the protocol itself. Yeah, awesome. Can we navigate over to item feed? Awesome. So now going back to item feed controller, we'll go to cell for row. Cell for row. In cell for row, we now want to go ahead and do, I'll say step 1, delegating object. Delegating object is the object that wants to listen to those changes. Here we'll say cell.delegate. In the configure item, I said current item equal to item.
No, I know, but when we
Let me go back to it. 1 second, we'll come right back here. Let's go to item cell again. So item cell, configure cell, right, Amini?
yeah,
configure cell.
No, we're passing the current item until they did select seller name.
In this guy.
Right. Why is it, for me, it's saying that it's optional, it needs to be in wrap?
Oh, we use an exclamation mark on it.
Oh, okay, so you're that.
Awesome. So back in our cell for row, back in the item feed view controller, here we did step 1 of the delegating object. Here we want to say delegate equal to cell, very similar to how we do table views, etc. And step 2, we want to have an extension to conform to the item cell delegate. So let's go create that. Can we scroll? Can we go down? Can we go down? Did we type out step 1? Need confirmation here?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So going down, let's go ahead and create an extension on our item feed controller. And what are we conforming to? We're conforming to item cell delegate. And we only have one function here, did select seller name. And now we could actually just test this out here. Say print in VC. And we could say item.seller name was selected. Build. So this is step 2 of the delegating object. So all in all, we have 5 steps. 3 steps in where we actually creating that custom protocol there, and in our view controller or whatever object we listening to, we have 2 steps there where we set the delegate and then we conform to the delegate.
What was step 2 on the first page?
Step 2 was weak var delegate. So at that point, we'll run the app and test it. Make sure our delegate is getting called correctly. Make sure our print statement is happening, and we'll continue on. So if I click on Bunny here, it tells me Bunny was selected. If I click on Shin, it tells me Shin was selected. If I click on Shin here, it tells me Shin was selected. So as we go, and that's how we test, right? We don't write like a whole lot of code, especially with a paradigm like that, and then we have bugs everywhere. Right, so we test as we go. Cool, so at that point we know it works, so we'll continue on. So when I click here, I wanna go ahead and push a view controller. The view controller doesn't exist yet. We'll create that view controller that we push to. That view controller, again, to look at our UI, the view controller will be seller items controller. It will have a header view, which we have already. We don't care about username for now. We'll just have username in the nav bar. So we'll have username in the nav bar, and then we have our cells already. So we have all that stuff already. The cell is going to be the nib. So let's keep going. Can we go to storyboard here? Can we navigate to storyboard?
Yes.
All right, so let's navigate to storyboard. We're going to main storyboard. We're going to main storyboard. We're going to our first area here. We'll put it somewhere above here. We could break up the storyboards, but that's fine for now. So let's look for a view controller. New view controller comes on our canvas. New view controller comes on our canvas. Immediately, we could embed it in a nav controller. We embed it in a nav controller, and we'll add in the one UI element it has will be a table view. So if you have a table view, let's go ahead and access a table view. And the table view will take up the entire space here of our scene. Let's set the constraints for it. 0 or standard everywhere here. Add for constraints. Bless you. Okay, cool. Next, we need to go ahead and create a new view controller file. The new view controller file we'll create, we will give it a name of seller items. So CocoaTouch class, subclass of UI view controller, and it's called seller items controller. Seller items controller. Seller items controller, subclass of UI view controller. We click next and we say create. Great. So with that, we go back to our storyboard. We open up our assistant editor with our seller items controller. And we navigate to our seller items controller here. And now we want to change the name of the class. Now we want to change the name of the class. So I click on my scene. I go to my identity inspector. I change the class name to seller items controller. I want to make sure I copy the class name into storyboard ID and press enter. All right. So we have our class being seller items controller. We have the storyboard ID being the same. We make sure that we press enter here. And we'll go ahead and drag a table view, our table view over. We'll call it table view. Clean up our view controller. We have no cell here. Our cell will come from nib. So we'll register a cell via our view controller. Cool. So at this point, we are done with our storyboard. We could close it out. And we could continue building out our seller items controller. Seller items controller has a table view. Great. What does it need? Well, it needs an item. Here, we need to initialize our item. Well, this will be a var here. We need to initialize our item because we're in a class. We'll do that with an initializer, fillable initializer as well here. That takes in a coder, because we're coming from storyboard, and it takes in an item, which is of type item. We'll say self item equal to item. We'll call super init with coder. And we also need this required initializer. Bless you. We build. Awesome. So we have our init here. We have our viewDid load here. We have our item. Add a header view to the table view. How are we going to do that? We did that this week. So on our table view, we have a table view header. So we'll say header view or table view header, table header view. Table header view, we wrote a subclass of UI view. We called it header view. Header view has an initializer that takes in an image URL. Where are we going to get that image URL from? Well, item has an image URL. Any questions or review about our header view here? Because we only did it once this week. That's the first time we did it. Any questions about it in particular? So every table view has a table view header. So here we created any view. You could pass in any view here to this table header view, right? Image view, whatever. right? As long as it's a subclass of UI view, I could pass it to my table view, okay? Any questions about our header view? And the most important part there was the frame, if I was to go back to it. Yes, that was the most important part of it. In our frame here, the height is the most important part because the width is going to be automatically set on the table view. Awesome. So here, cool. Are we good here, pretty much? Still typing? So the next step we'll take is to go ahead and segue, right? So we'll segue whenever we tap on that particular user, we'll segue from our item feed over to our seller items controller. Oh, we could do other things here while we're here. Can I move down a bit? Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and implement our table view stuff here. Seller items controller, UI, table view, data source. We need data. We don't have data yet. We need data. Data comes in the form of items. It's an array of items. And we'll have a date set on it. It's going to come from a network, which is Firebase. And here we'll say self table view dot reload data. And what did we forget to do? We forgot to register the cell, right? Right? We got to register the cell as well. So register the cell right here. So table view dot register nib. Nib is UI nib. And our nib name is item cell.
Isn't the header view going to have an image of the user and not image of the item that was
It's going to have an image of the user. What did I pass in? Oh. We need the user. Yeah. We need the user. Actually, for now, let's just do the image URL. Because for now, let's just do the image URL. And if we have time, we'll grab the user URL. Because we have the user URL. We could simply query the user object, the user collection. Actually, that's fine. We have time to do that. But I'll put that to do for now. We'll first show the image URL of the actual item. And then we'll do, I think we have time for the to do here. So fetch the user image URL from the users collection. Users collection. Right? Quickly, we see how handy it is to have a users collection, right? Because each user has their own data. So we'll go to that users collection and grab that URL. Amini? Cool? Awesome. So we'll do that, but first we'll just show that, then we'll update it. Cool? Awesome. So going back to our data source, what's our data source look like? We have number of rows. We return items that count. And then we have cell for row. Here we have our custom cell, table view, DQ, reusable cell, and it's item cell, index path. We typecast it to item cell. And here we have a fiddle error because this is a developer error here. We'll say could not downcast to item cell. And we have an item cell. Great. Let's get an item. Items index path that row, and we'll say on the cell, go ahead and configure yourself. Where am I? Am I in no man's land? Yes, I am. On the cell, go ahead and configure the cell. We're not configuring the favorite, we're configuring an item. I will simply say item.
Are we going to query
Yeah, we have to query.
to get the list of items that belong to that certain?
Yes, and we have a function for that already that we wrote yesterday, and we'll use that. It's not a listener; it's just get documents. But we know refresh control. We could always add it if we need to. Correct? Very good. Awesome. So return cell, set up the configure cell. We have an item. We crash if we do not have a valid cell because here, remember, this is a developer error here. Developer error. That's why we intentionally crash to fix the error. And we also need a height. So height, extension, seller, items controller, UI, table view, delegate. Even that we could have a constant for, so height for row, because we return it 3 places already. So here we could simply have a constant. Example, we could say row dot height somewhere. In a constants file. So we could just say row dot height instead of doing this like hard coded 140 everywhere. So those are big takeaways. Anytime you start doing like hard-coded numbers like that, like really be careful and then have a constant somewhere, right? Because you want it to be consistent throughout your application. So make sure in your view did load, you say tableview.delegate equals self in order for our height for row to get called. Because currently we don't have tableview.delegate equals self. Can we scroll up to view did load? We good? All right, cool. So in view did load, we have none of them. Ha. So tableview.datasource equal to self, that's for our data, and tableview.delegate equal to self. And again, all that could go into, for example, configure table view, where I'm like writing a function called configure table view, like that. So that way this is, right, in its own function. Fetch user. So let's go ahead and fetch stuff. We don't have our data yet. So let's fetch our data. So private function fetch items. What does that look like? That's where we really want to do a singleton here. To do refactor to use refactor database service and storage service to a singleton, since we are creating instances throughout our application. Since we are creating new instances throughout our application. So this would be, example, I would just say database service dot shared and call my function. whatever my function is. So we'll refactor that at some point, or you could refactor it, or you could just use it straight away in your assessment, okay? And the way we would do that in our database service class, the way we create a singleton for review here, this is review. In our database service class, we create a singleton this way, right? We say init, well, private, init. So at this point, I want to make sure the initializer becomes private. And then the only way I access my functions is via this shared instance here, which I say static let shared equal to database service, like that. And then the way I use it here, for example, is this. Cool? But now we have a database instance we have to create. I'll create it in line for now. I'll just say database, but keep in mind that we need to refactor this at some point, or we could just like, for our assessment, go directly to a singleton. Everybody with me? All right, so here we'll say database service. What I want to do is fetch user items. Fetch user items. Here I want to pass in a user ID. I want to pass in a user ID. I do not have a user ID. I need to get one. How do we get a user ID? Mr. Eric? Yeah. How do I get the current user? Oh, sorry, not even the current user. No. It's not the current user. Backtrack. Item.setID. It's not the current user. Right? Everybody with me here? Right? This is not the current user. This is any user. Right? So any user, whichever user I clicked on the item, I want to get the information. The way I get the information is via this seller ID here. Right? Awesome. So here on our switch statement, we'll say switch on result, case failure, let error. Let's break retain cycles. So case failure, dispatch queue main.async here, and we'll simply put an error message. Show alert. Our error message will be such that failed fetching and error.localize description. And next we'll go down to our success case, which is items. And here we have our items. So at this point, we have our items. We have a did set on our items, which is a property observer. And we have our table view being reloaded. While we're here, we could also go ahead and do what Amini was suggesting, get the actual user's photo, not the profile, not the image photo. So fetch user photo. Can we still see everything we have to type out if I scroll down this way? Yeah. All right, cool. So fetch user photo, what does that look like? Again, we need a database service here. That's why we have to refactor this to a shared instance. And here we will say we want to get to a user. This is different. This is not database service. We'll go directly to Firestore. Again, we could also refactor this function. I need Firestore. Can I scroll up and we'll come right back down? Let's all scroll up together. Import Firebase off, not Firebase off. Firebase Firestore. So let's all import Firebase Firestore so that we have access to Firebase Firestore. Yes, everybody? We're still here? We're going strong? This is the last day before remote. We gotta be, right? I'm gonna miss seeing you guys. Fetch user photo. So here we have Firestore.collection. What collection are we after? What collection are we after? The users. So database service dot users collection. In the users collection, I need that user ID. So users collection document and we will go ahead and get documents. User collection, document, get document. This is good. And get document collection snapshot error build. Okay, so here, let's recap here. Firestore collection, I'm after the users collection. In the users collection, I'm after the user ID. We know the user ID. The user ID is item.sellerID. And we'll continue on if let error equal to error here, else if let snapshot equal to snapshot. Weak self. Here we'll just print out an error. Let me just do it. Print out an error. Self dot show alert. Error fetch in user. Error dot localize description. And now we have a snapshot. In that snapshot, the only thing we're interested in really is the image URL. So we'll get access to that. Image URL equal to snapshot. Let's just do an if let here. That's going to come out as an optional. Snapshot dot document. Snapshot data. On the data, I'm querying for image URL. Build. This guy is optional. So here we have a string. Well, any. We gotta convert it to a string. It's called photo URL. Let me verify here real quick. Let's verify together. Actually, I'll verify on my end. So we have users. Yeah, thanks, Samini. So it's a photo URL, that's the key. Because if we're looking for image URL, it doesn't exist. This would be nil. So make sure the key is the same. So we have a photo URL. We have our photo URL here. And we could just go ahead and update our header view here. Dispatch queue.main.async and self dot table view dot header view equal to header view and here we're passing in that image URL. Right, so here instead of getting the item URL, we're getting the user's URL. Let's just call it photo URL to be consistent. Photo URL, photo URL. So this is fetch user photo, or update user photo, whatever we want to call it. What does it do? It goes to Firestore, it goes to the collection of users, it goes to that particular seller's ID, doesn't really matter. It could be the seller themselves or the current user themselves. It searches for a document, it gets a snapshot, always represented as a snapshot here. The snapshot, in that case, we could create a user model. Everybody? We could have created a user model, but here we're just saying, okay, we just want to get the URL as well. But keep in mind, this could also be refactored to a user model. To a user model. Right? Questions about that particular one there? Because a user could have many entities or many properties. Right? So here, we bypassing the whole model and going directly into our dictionary and query for the photo URL. Because remember, at the end of the day, the data here represents that dictionary object. Questions about data? Questions about data? That's the same data we use in all our initializers. But here we did not create a user, so we don't have that on hand, but we could have easily created a user and then just instantiate a user. Everybody with me? Cool? All right, just keep that in mind. So we have our fetch user photo. Can we go up to view did load? Can we go up to view did load? All right, so back in view did load, what's happening right now? We call configure table view. We haven't called fetch items. Let's go ahead and call fetch items. What's happening here? Let's call fetch items and let's call fetch user photo. We could remove that to do. All right. So basically we set up this view controller for it to maintain itself, but we haven't segued yet. So let's go ahead and segue. Can we now navigate to this item feed? Can we navigate to item feed? Yeah. Make sure your view did load has configure table view, fetch items, and fetch user photo. Yes? Yeah. All right, cool. So now let's navigate to item feed. In our item feed controller, we want to make sure we're in the extension that conforms to item cell delegate. And we'll write some code here because we don't want to just print something. We want to actually segue. So let's get the item. Well, we have the item. Let's get storyboard. The storyboard we're segueing from. This is important. So the storyboard we're segueing from or to is, what's the name of it, Luba?
No, I'm just like, I'm lost here.
Are you up to, did you complete your items, your seller items controller?
Are we in different controller?
The one where we segue into this one.
I didn't, so that's why.
The seller items?
No, just my table view didn't work.
Which table view?
Now it works, I just need to finish doing it.
Okay, so you want seller item controller?
No, it's okay. You can
Okay.
continue.
All right, so back in our item feed controller, we have the storyboard. The storyboard name, what's the storyboard name here? Main view. So main view, bundle is nil. Yes, sir.
Why are we creating a new instance of storyboard? Don't we already?
The storyboard we have already is not the main view storyboard. We removed the storyboard when we started working on that project. Right now we have two storyboards. We have a login storyboard and we have a main view storyboard. This is not main storyboard.
So you can't just write storyboard.
That would be the instance from the info plist, which we do not have one right now. Very good. All those are good questions here. So let's go back to item feed. So that's why we created this, right? Cool. All right. So continuing on, Now we want to get an instance of the thing we're going to. So seller items controller equal to storyboard dot instantiate. We want to instantiate with ID and coder. So the ID is the ID of the storyboard we're going to, or the view controller we're going to, sorry. Seller items controller, that's where we're going to. And we have our coder object, which is again new in iOS 13. This is using dependency injection in iOS 13, which is new. And now we want to return a seller storyboard, a seller view controller. So seller items controller takes an initializer. The initializer we created is this initializer here that takes a coder object and the item. We have both of those. So we say coder. We say coder, and we say item. So at that point we have our, is that you or me? Oh man, it's on fire. I'm not even running Zoom either. I need 8 more cores. So we have our seller items controller here. And now we want to navigate to it. So navigation controller, push seller onto the view. So this is using full dependency injection. Our object is fully encapsulated. We're using an initializer on the storyboard to navigate to that storyboard. Again, this is all new in iOS 13 here. Before that, we'd have to have our properties all public and individually inject them. But now we have access to the full initializer. So when we click on a cell, we should now be able to segue to that particular seller controller. Any questions about what we've done so far? Any questions? All right, so let us run our app and see if we have any errors here or if everything works on the first try. So if I click on Shen here, I get a crash because something is wrong here. At that point, we don't panic. We scroll up right above our 0 stack trace here, and now it says must pass a valid reuse identifier. Right, when I registered the nib itself, did we not pass in a reuse identifier? Awesome, that's good. So now we go back to where we registered our nib. Item feed, not item feed. Where are we going to? So item, let's navigate back to seller items controller. In seller items controller, in view did load, we haven't set that up. Configure right here. Where is it? Here. Okay, so we're missing, what are we missing here? Item cell. Oh, because we stopped here because we had to go somewhere else, right? So again, when you have that error, please scroll up above the 0 stack and see what's going on there and investigate, are you registering a cell? Did you give it the right name? Everybody with me? Please, okay. So now I click on Shen, for example, and we still crash with some other error. Must register nib, identifier prototype cell storyboard, unable to DQ cell item cell. Okay, let's see what's happening here. So item cell, down in our cell 4 row, we have item cell. I have item cell here. In our register, we have item cell here, Tableview register UI nib. So let's go back and see what we have here. Back in our nib class, what is the cell ID? So click on our cell here. We have item cell, that's what we have. It's an item cell. Seller items, item cell, item cell. Item cell, item cell. We call configure. Cell for row. Item cell here. Oh, right here. Thank you, sir. Our identifier, we had an uppercase I here. We had an uppercase I, and our identifier is a lowercase I. Okay? Be careful here. Thank you, sir. All right, so let's run it again and see what we have this time. So click on any username. We're able to segue and see the user photo, see whatever items they have. Go back, click on Shin, for example. We have, this is the user's profile image, and we have the items of that particular user. I click, well, Shin is the same thing here. Are we all able to segue over? All right, awesome. We need the seller name here. Let's add the seller name in the nav bar. So in the nav bar, let's add the seller name, and we will do some refactoring and we'll wrap up. So in the seller items controller here, in our view did load, that's fine. In our view did load, simply do navigation item dot title equal to item dot seller name. So we'll simply put the seller name in the nav bar, contrary to what we designed. So I have item.seller name. Let's run it again.
Doesn't the entity have a title?
We designed it to have a title, but we did not add a title to it. So it doesn't have it. So right now we'll just put it in the title bar, right? So the design we had, that's what we were going for here. We were going for having the photo plus like the username here. Right, but our header view currently only takes in an image URL. But feel free to, right, do whatever we want to do here so that the username could be here or whatever we want to do. Cool? But for now, we put the username up here, and we could just put in like an @ symbol here if we want, like that, so it looks a bit better. And run that again, and we'll do some refactoring now with our dates and stuff. So if I click on Shin, for example, it goes here. If I click on Bunny, for example, it goes here. Cool? Any questions about header views or segueing from storyboards, dependency injection from storyboards? All right, cool. So let us do some refactoring. I think the only refactor we'll do for now is dates, for example. And if we have time, we'll do our singleton. So for our date object, we use dates a lot of places. In the item feed here, for example, our date is not formatted correctly here, and we don't want to have date formatted throughout our code. Okay? We don't want to have a date formatted throughout our code. So let's go ahead and write an extension on date in the extensions folder. In the extensions folder, do we all see our extensions folder? Let's create a new file there. A Swift file, and we'll extend date. So we could simply say date plus extensions. Date plus extensions, click on create. And we want to use, well, foundation, we don't need UI kit here. Extension on date. And we'll write an instance function or instance method. We'll call it date string. date string returns a string. It takes in some sort of format, which is also a string, which we will default to. I'm going over to NS date formatter. NS date formatter. So NS date formatter, the default format we'll take is 4Es, like we have in our code earlier. So that takes out like Friday, for example. So the 4Es here represents the entire Friday string, like Friday, as opposed to fry. So Friday, we'll say March as an MAR. So we'll say March, not March like that. We'll say March. We'll say the day, like the 13th. We don't care about the year. We'll go over to the hour of the day. And we'll go over to minutes. And A represents PM or AM. Everybody, when I say A here, it shows us AM or PM. So that's a default format. I could also pass in my own format. Again, this is a default parameter. So let's continue on. We'll create our date formatter, and it's a date formatter. We'll say date formatter dot date format is the format that we passed in, or our default format. So the way this works, if I do not pass a format, it takes the default format. Okay? If I want to have my own format, like the own way I want to format my date, I pass it in. And then we return date formatter dot string from self. And self, what does self do? Self represents what here? Self represents the date. The date object itself. For example, on our date value is a date. I'll simply say date string. So the date value here is the same as self. Everybody? Questions? All right, cool. So this we could use throughout our code, because the last thing we're going to do is copy that code throughout our code in every place we want to use it. But now we have a date extension. We could just simply say date string, and it returns us a date. So as we wrote that function, what we could do is search for where we have date formatter. Does everybody see where the search icon is here in Xcode? Click on the search icon and type in date format, or just, you don't have to type in the whole word. Just type in date format, press enter. And we could also filter. Do we see where it says in workspace? Do we see where it says in workspace? So click on in workspace, and you could filter by workspaces. Right now we have 2 projects here, so we only want to search within the Firebase demo project. We don't want to search in the pods as well. So I'll click on the Firebase demo. I'll click on the Firebase demo here, and I will enter again. Cool? And we should have less results. Everybody with me? So anyway we use date formatter, we want to go ahead and reform or refactor our code. So click on, in that case, we're only using it right now in the item detail. Yes? Is that the only place we see? We click on it, and we want to delete this. Just delete that. And this is the same format we just passed in, by the way. This is the one we used. So go ahead and delete date formatter. Build, we should have an error somewhere. So delete it. And let's go to our error right here. Our error is in self for row. Is that correct? So now let's go ahead and refactor this. Refactor that, just remove that whole line. Actually, we're using date string here. That's fine. So for date string, we'll simply say on the comment has a date. The date is a time interval On that time interval, we say date value, which represents a date. So if I say date value here, dot date value, it's a type date. Do we see that? On that date, I'll simply say date string. And date string returns us that string we just, the extension we just wrote, it returns us a string. Everybody with me? Any questions about that? All right, so now we have our date string, we use it here, and we are good to go. Let's run our app and verify again. Yes? On the extension, you said you have, what error you have? Are you extending date? Aaron, double check Chelsea's computer. So make sure you're extending, CTA. Make sure we extend date and make sure we return in a string here. Cool? All right. So let's run the app again. This was coming from item detail. Let's run our app again. This is coming from the comments section. So do we have comments here? We have comments here. So the date still works correctly. If you have comments, just verify your comments dates are still working. Everybody? The date for the comments. Just add a comment and make sure that date is still the same. Because whatever refactor we just did, it just did the refactoring to use an extension. Can we confirm that? We got a confirmation. So back in our item, back here in our item detail controller, in the cell for row, this is basically what we did. So now on any common date, on any time interval, we could say date value, get us the date value, which is date. On that date, we could say date string, which is the extension we wrote. Cool. So date value is a date, common date is a time interval. Right? Common date is a time interval, part of Firebase here, and date value is a date object, and the date string is a string from our extension. All right, so let's see what we have here. So we need to fix this as well. We'll sort this by date or most recent date. All right, and then we'll wrap it up. So let us go to, this is the cell for row, right? This is item cell. Let's navigate to item cell. Navigate to item cell. Navigate to item cell. And navigate to update UI. In item cell, are we all in update UI? All right, where are we doing date stuff? We're doing date right here. So right on line 62, wherever it says date label.text, we want to go ahead and use our extension because right now, on our date, this is not a correctly formatted date. Do we agree? We want to format it correctly. So anywhere you're using a time interval, you could use that extension we have, right? So you have your CTA. There's a lot of extensions you could put into your project right away, right? There's the navigation extension, there's the alerts extension, now there's the date extension, right? So on description, which just returns a string, we'll say date string. Where does date string come from? Date string comes from that extension we just wrote. So it converts a date to a string. We run our app again to verify that the dates are formatted here. And now we have Friday, March 13th, Friday of March 13th, Friday of March 13th, which is today, all at the same time. There's a bigger problem there. My date object might be wrong. If you're capturing that here, you need to take a look at your model. Does everybody have the same dates showing up? Yeah. We need to take a look at the model because the model might be, there might be an error with our keys. So go back to our item, and go back to our date object here. I have listed date here. Let me see, that's what I called it on Firebase. Items, listed date, that's what I have here, listed date. Listed date is correct, but it comes back as, 1 second, let me just put a breakpoint here and test this out. Is it not? Oh, yeah, that would be that problem there. Good observation there, thank you. Saves us from debugging. Look for Cassandra on the CTA there. So listed date, we have a timestamp. I'm like, it's the same logic for our comments. So let's convert this to timestamp, which we don't have Firebase there. In our import statement, let's import Firebase to get access to timestamp, because that's how we created it. We created it with a timestamp. And now we want to go ahead. So change line 16. Your listed date should now be over timestamp. And our initializer here should be timestamp as well. Build that. That should just be a timestamp with some default date if we don't have a date. So that's what happened. We didn't have a correct date, so it went to the default date here. Timestamp, build. And we might have an error someplace else here. So make sure what we updated listed date. We removed the date object to be a timestamp because that's what we sent up to Firebase. And we converted it to a timestamp via our initializer here. And now we have to make sure that our error, our last error, we have build update UI in our item cell, correct? And lastly, we go to item cell, build. All that should be good here. Listed date here. Item, where's the initializer for this? Update UI right here. So update UI, the function definition, change it to timestamp. We need to import Firebase as well, right? Is it lowercase s? So import Firebase. Import Firebase. Build.
It still works to use date value.
No, we might not have data.
What's that? Import Firebase and configure timestamp, right? Timestamp.
Well, you're sending it a date and expect a timestamp.
So this is the date here. This is wrong here. Temp value here. Okay. Let's backtrack for a second. So here, what are we expecting? We have a timestamp, correct? We pass in a timestamp here, and here, let's just pass in our timestamp here. Okay. And here, timestamp has no value date string. It doesn't. We need to say date value dot date string, build, and at that point we should be good to go. So a couple things we did. We updated our timestamp value from date, and on line 63 we saying date.date value dot date string. Date is fun, right? Okay. I'm still here. What? Scroll up to right here? Okay. Somebody run the app again and verify that the dates are different for objects you created. Confirmation, thumbs up. Awesome. The next thing we could do, or the last task we'll do, is sort it. So try sorting it by most recent date, and we'll do it together. So if your date works, just sort it by most recent date. So whatever the most recent item you created should be at the top of the table view. Scroll down. Did we sort by date? Magia, did you sort by date? When you run the app, make sure it's sorted by date, right? So most recent date should start at the top. Like for my example here, March 12th, 12:34 p.m. should be the first value or the first item. So let's do that. I'll give you guys a minute to do it, and then we'll do it together. Nobody got it? Sort by date. Falling asleep there? Cassandra?
We would do that in the fetch.
Yeah, you could do it in the fetch, yeah, wherever you have those items there. We want to sort by date, like my bike should be at the top there, because it's the most recent date. Yeah. The same way we did that already for the comments, right? If we look at comments, that's already sorted by date, right? So who has comments? This guy has comments, right? So that's sorted by date already. Do we see that? Everybody agreeing here? Right? That's sorted by date already. So basically, it's just like finding and, right? So come CTA, you want to sort by date, what do? We've done it already here. So that's where you find it. Mr. Eric, you sorted by date? Chelsea? Mr. Wan?
Yep.
Are your items sorted by date, most recent date?
Working on it, is it just like a map, reverse?
Well, it wouldn't be map. Like if you want to sort something, what type of function there?
Sort?
Yeah, sorted, yeah. Very good. Mr. Cameron, sir, are you sorted by date?
Yes.
So come complete it for us, sir. Thank you. Give it up for Cameron. You can do it on my computer. All right, so Cameron is sorting by date here. Let's pay attention.
Hmm? Hmm?
You could just it by date value right away.
Say again?
Cameron is currently in database service. So he's doing the sort before he gets to the view controller. We did ours in the view controller, but he's doing his in the database service. So right now he's sorting all of them before they get to the view controller. So before he returns the favorites, he does it directly in the success block.
I don't know, are we?
At that point, he's just doing it by all, which makes sense, because everybody, the basic, we got used to sorting by most recent date, regardless of what it is.
And then we have to go back here and do it here on the listener. This is an item feed. Because we have a listener, we have to do it here.
But what you're doing is almost redundant, right? Like you sorted it.
Is
already.
it?
You sorted it already.
But they're two different.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry. So we
Do you want me to run
sort
it?
by data. I should see my bike first now of Gary on that item feed. Oh, I think you do it. Let's send it.
No, because one is.
I want 12. I want March 12 to appear first.
Oh,
So
okay.
let's change the sort of color in there. So now it's going to be descending, where most recent is at the top. Seconds is on timestamp. You could also use date value. Cool. I got my bike first, because this is the most recent date. Does that make sense, everybody? Any questions for Mr. Cameron? Right? So we all have to be comfortable by sorting. If we ask you to sort by date, sort by whatever it is, price, whatever, we should be able to sort. Actually, it's sorted by price too. That's just random though. Thank you, sir. So pretty much, thank you. Give it up for Cameron. So pretty much that wraps our project up, okay? There's a lot of parts that we did. There's a lot of things we did with Firebase, with iOS, with UI, right? We saw a lot here. So that gives us enough to use as a template or a resource for our CTA, okay? If there's any questions you want to go over for the next 5 minutes or so, let me know, and then we'll go over any part of the app that you want to go over. Yes?
So because it's a timestamp where,
Because it's a timestamp. The timestamp, okay, timestamp, this is the timestamp here.
right,
That timestamp has seconds, it also has date value. You could use date value as well,
okay.
okay? There's date value and there's also seconds. Cameron chose to use seconds, right? At the end of the day, it's a comparison with the same set of object there. Any other questions regarding the application? And again, we did a lot of parts. If I have to go back to our to-dos for that project, there was a lot, right? So if I go GitHub and I go to repos, I go to demo, we have an app feature list here, which I'll just check out the minute we've done. The user could sign in into the app. We should be able to do that for our project. I could create a new account. I can sign out. User can create an item. User can view an item. User could also delete an item down here. App stores user photos. That's storage. App stores item photos. Also storage. User can change their profile photo. User can delete only their created items. Security rules, we'll come to that post CTA. Or I'll just make a video to show what that looks like, but don't be responsible for that for CTA there. User can see a specific user item. We just did that today, right? I click on a username, I'm able to see that particular user's items, correct? Right? So that's querying there. We were able to do querying. Can add a comment. We were able to do commenting. We did sub-collections. That's why we introduced sub-collections. We're able to query, but this is this is an icebox feature. We did not get to that, but this is fine. This was just like adding more UI. What I'm talking about here is, say we had a next 3 hours, we would create this UI here on number 5. Do we see number 5 here? This is a collection view that scrolls horizontally. Do we see that? Yes. And if I click on a cell, it filters the table view by category. Do we all see that? Yes, right? And all the knowledge we know already, we could do this. Do we agree? Right? But don't give me a headache. So all the items, all the things we've done already so far, we have seen this, correct? This is basically an X query. We have a items collection, just filter by category. All right? But everything else we did. User can favorite an item. We did that. We did favoriting. We did unfavoriting. You could also check if something is a favorite, right? So really, you could build almost any app that you want to do with Firebase using the scaffold app we have here, right? We have a database service, we have a storage service, and we have authentication. The only thing I'll do post-lecture here is refactor. I'll refactor the code to use a singleton for the database service here, right? For our database service, I'll refactor it to use a singleton, and I'll post the final project, okay? That way we could get clone, change our plist, and then have that there. Everybody with me? So I don't want to do database instance everywhere throughout my app. There's no reason to create new memory when we don't need it. Everybody with me? Any questions apart from that there? And again, we have the Firebase documentation for resource there. It's a really good resource. Okay? Yes, question?
Can I see what Amber did in the item feed view controller?
The what? Sorry.
Item feed view controller.
Item feed view controller. Item feed view controller. This part right here? Yeah, it's just filtered by time there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Can you go to the database service?
Database service. What part are we looking at? At this point, I'll stop lecture. We need to eat. And then any other questions, we will come up here. Thank you. Last day of remote, guys. I mean, last day of not remote, but physically here. I'll miss you guys.